Hey gang, welcome back to another video here at Joe Daddy's Garage. This video is going to be a maintenance video about replacing the hub on this 2007 Kia Sportage. Now I want to make something clear. I did the same repair back in April of 2014. That video is probably my least favorite video of all the stuff that I've done on the channel. I got a lot of thumbs down on that video, and after watching it several times I realized why. When I made that video, I made some poor choices. I did not film it properly. I did not do a good demonstration, and it was really done kind of as an afterthought in the process. So I want to make up for that. As it is, this hub has gone bad again. So I'm going to replace it with a new one that I have right here. And I'm going to go through the process step by step so that you have a better understanding of how to do this. One thing I like to do before I jack up the car is break the lug nuts loose on the wheel. And while it's sitting on the ground, this is a good time to do it. There are two ways to jack this up. Maybe more than two ways, but two simple ways. One is the normal jack point off of the bottom of the car, where you'd put the standard jack and jack it up. And the second would be that bar, or that brace, that's in front of the gas tank, right there. So you can offset the jack if you just wanted to do one side, or you can jack in the center and lift up the whole back of the vehicle. That's what I'm going to do. So now you can see where the jack is placed. That'll lift both wheels off the ground, but I'm not going to mess with the right rear. So at this point, I want to put a jack stand under the vehicle for support of the left side of the vehicle. In this case, I'm going underneath that pinch weld where the normal jack would go. Now you may say, what's the reason for replacing this wheel hub? Well, things wear out. And in this case, if I grab a hold of the wheel, the studs are still snug enough that it's not going to make a difference. But if I grab the wheel, I can move it, and I should not be able to move it. You can hear that, I hope. It still turns okay. You hear a little bit of noise though, right? Okay. So that's got to come off. Tools needed for this repair. At the minimum, a 14mm wrench to remove the caliper and the caliper bracket. The 17mm wrench may be used to help remove the caliper, and I'll show that later in the video. You'll need a breaker bar, a torque wrench that goes to at least 150 foot-pounds, an 1¼ inch socket or a 31mm socket, a variety of screwdrivers, a hammer, a punch, and maybe an impact hammer if you want to save your hand from getting abused, and you may need a caliper compression tool. Now, the next step in the process is removing, at the minimum, the caliper and bracket together. I would recommend doing the caliper by itself and then the bracket. The caliper is held on with 14mm bolts, and there's also, in the midsection here of the mount, is a 17mm. Okay? The way that works is, these two, this part can pivot and move, and this is the lock nut. So sometimes when you take something loose like this, you could run into problems to where that nut will turn while you're trying to turn the bolt out. So just as an example, I'm going to tap on this with a mallet and break tension on it, or break torque. Now, like I said, sometimes that will turn, and all you have to do is put that 17mm on there to hold it in place, and you can see I can rotate that independent of the bolt, but they lock against each other. So break that loose, take the nut out, or the bolt out, I'm sorry, set that aside. Do the same thing on the bottom. And again, I use a mallet so that I don't injure my hands, but these are going to come out pretty easily, at least here in the South, in Georgia. And now the caliper will slide off. So you can set that aside. It can just sit up on top. Now you'll notice these brake pads are new. Well, that's because I just changed them 2 days ago when I discovered that this wheel bearing was bad. So you can take these pads, pull them off, set them aside. The outer pad doesn't have any screech indicator on it, and the inner does, and it's on the upper side. So when you put that in, when you do brake pads, the two inners have these little screech indicators or wear indicators, and so they were on the upside. That's all I can tell you. Now at this point, I want to get this bracket off. Now this bracket is held on with 14mm bolts. So I'm going to do the same process. Put the wrench on, and again I'm going to use a mallet just to break these loose. There's two of them. Now, what you could do, if you wanted to, is just remove those two bolts and take this off as an assembly, but I'm just showing you this way because to me it's a little easier, it's less to deal with. And if you've got an older rotor, let's say, and the pads have worn into them, you'll have a hard time putting things back together without compressing the caliper, because it's going to want to pinch around the edge of the rotor where a little ridge can develop from wear. So there's one bolt. Bracket, bolt. Set those aside. Now, yeah, it could be part bearing, that could be part brake dust. Let me point something out here. The internal part of this acts as a brake drum for your parking brake. So to pull this off, you cannot have your parking brake applied. You won't get it off. But to get the rotor off, it's got a screw right there that has to come out. That worked. Take off that screw, and your rotor comes off. Voila! Now you see the brake shoes and the internal part of the rotor, which is basically a brake drum. So those look like they're in good shape. Still a lot of life left in them. Now, you can still hear that. In order to get the hub assembly off, I have to get access to a nut that's behind this cover. So I take a screwdriver, you have to encourage it. It's a snug fit. It's a dust cover to keep out debris from inside or around the bearing. Or actually a dust cover to protect the nut. Ah, there we go. There it is. The nut. Now I want to remove the nut. I believe this is probably a 31mm because I have impact sockets and a 30 is too small. And the 32 has a little play in it. So it would probably work, but has some play. But I did find that an 1.25" socket fits really nice. So now all I have to do is get it set where I want it, put on the breaker bar, and break it loose. once that is off, slide this out. What you'll find is a key indicated washer. Has a little tang on it, and that lines up on the groove on the axle. So again, this was put on 6 years ago, and I don't know what the mileage was exactly. It may have been 150,000, something like that, but it's currently at 200,000 miles, and the warranty is out of date on this hub, so I can't take it back for a warranty repair, but you know, that's the price you pay. Let me see. Yeah, there's some play. You can. I doubt there's anything I could do to save it as it is. Just odd that it has failed this way. Now I want to put on the new hub. I want to point out, I looked this up, I can show you a picture of it, but the torque on that nut is supposed to be 148 to 192 foot-pounds. And just for your information, if you wanted to know, the wheel studs are to be 66 to 81. So if you want to use that torque, it's up to you, or you can look it up. Just a quick comparison. Looks like the same thing. This will just slip on. Keyed washer, and it comes with a new nut in the box. Same thing. Just spin that on. So I'm going to put some torque on this because, you know, that's what needs to happen. I have a big Mac Tools torque wrench, and in this case 148 to 192 is almost the limit of this torque wrench, which is 150 foot-pounds. So I'm going to set it for 150 foot-pounds. There you go. Now again, it's 148 to 192, so I could go over that, but that's enough. With that in place, the last thing you need to do is stake the nut. And what that means is the nut has, in this case I'll show you on the old one, there's an indent right there. That is meant to lock in the nut to the axle. So you can, where the groove is for that slot that I showed you with the washer, take a punch and a hammer and drive that into that. Hopefully you can see that. So now that nut, in essence, should not be able to come loose. Now again, you can take a look at the shoes, the inside of the rotor, make sure it's in good shape, clean up anything that seems obvious, but this is about replacing this hub. So everything's in good shape. I have that screw hole right there, so I'll have to match that up with the hole in the rotor. Some people say you don't have to put these back in. I put them back in. A little bit of drag, that's from the shoes. Alright. Now I'll go back to putting the bracket on for the caliper and putting the caliper in place. I almost forgot the dust cover. Put that in place. I'll get it started Then you can use a screwdriver or a punch and knock it in on the flange. Alright, now the caliper. Now the bracket goes back on and takes those 14mm head bolts. I don't know what the torque is. I'll just tell you that up front. If you want to look it up, I'm sure you can find it somewhere, but I'm just going to make sure they're tight. Take the pads, again the one with the little screech indicator goes on the top, or on the back side I should say. It's indicated with a screech up, and then get this one wiggled in there. Now I'm hoping that the caliper itself will just slip on. Aha! Because if it doesn't, what you can do, and if you're going to do brake pads at the same time, this is all you have to do to do brake pads. So we're in the middle of the process. I'll show you one more step, just because you're here. Okay, the caliper will need to be compressed if you're putting on new pads, or if it doesn't want to slip back over in this case. So you take an old pad and you use one of these caliper compression tools, and all that does is a plate with a little screw on it, and it pushes against the pad, which pushes the piston back into the caliper. So we're good to go. I don't have to worry about that. Just a little bonus for you. So again, slip that around. You'll have to push these plunger mount points. These slide in and out, I should tell you, because as the pads wear out, the caliper has to move. So that's what those do, is they move to compensate for the wear on the pads. So sometimes you have to just wiggle them around, push it in a little bit. Again, 14mm bolts. There you go. That's it. Now, honestly, this is probably one of the easier hubs to replace, but there's several steps involved, as you can see. All right, so that's the end of this video. You know, I hope this makes up for the really bad video that I did 6 years ago, but I've learned a lot since then. As I've made videos over the years, I've learned that people want to see how the bolts come out, how the pieces come off, how they go back together, all those sort of things, and I think I covered that pretty well in this one. So please forgive me for that last video. If you'd be so kind, throw a thumbs up on the video, leave a comment. If you haven't already, please subscribe, share the video, all those things that help the channel grow. And that's going to be it. So until next time, take care of yourselves. Hey gang, I'm back with another video about doing maintenance on a Kia Sportage. Now, let me get some things clear before I get really into that. Before I want to... One thing, well, no. And an 1.25" or 30mm, no, it's 31. An 1.25" or 31mm nut, or... Alright, that's going to be the end of this video. I'm not going to go through the process of putting the bolt on, or... Tools needed for this job: 14mm wrench for the caliper and the caliper bracket, 17mm wrench that could hold the... So I want to say thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing. if you'd be so kind, throw a thumbs up on there, and I will try to continue to do more and more informational videos